Some guilds would argue that Cenarius is the toughest fight in the Emerald Nightmare, and depending on how well your guild members are at executing mechanics, it can be. Overall, for me, the fight is very simple once you understand how to manage the ads, which I'll discuss in order of priority. This is a two-phase fight. The first phase of the fight is all about dealing with the ads and DPSing the boss at the same time. And the second phase is the burn phase, where you have a very limited amount of time to finish off the boss before you run out of room in the arena and everybody dies. So, all throughout Phase 1, Cenarius is going to spawn waves of ads you're going to have to deal with. These waves are going to spawn periodically, and they're going to spawn in the four corners of the room. Now, you have an ally in this fight called Malfuria. Malfurian's going to help you fight Cenarius the entire time. You don't have to worry about healing him or keeping him up, he does his own thing. Malfurian's periodically going to cleanse one of the ads that spawns, and the ad he cleanses is dependent on which one your raid is closest to. So, you can look up online to see the order of the ads that spawn and where they spawn on the map, and your raid can decide which ones they want to cleanse at which time. I'm going to discuss the strategy that I used in the order of ads that I found the most effective for killing this boss. So let's actually discuss the ads. The first one we'll go over is the Wisps. Now, if the Wisps are not cleansed, they are going to spawn anywhere from 8 to 12 little Wisp ads that will fly around the arena and explode on random players. Now, normally this isn't very deadly, but if your raid is clustered up, such as you have a high amount of ranged or a high amount of melee DPS and they're all stacked together, if you have 8 or 9 of these Wisps all detonate on the same group of players, it will wipe them instantly. They do a very high amount of damage altogether. So that's why on Heroic we found it most effective to cleanse the Wisps every single time that they were up, so that we did not have to deal with the massive raid AoE that they would put out when they detonate. Again, that depends on your raid and what you guys want to do. Now, if you do cleanse the Wisps, they're going to spawn patches of the cleansed ground, which is the green pools that you see on the screen. Stepping over these pools is going to reset your stacks from Cenarius. Now, on Heroic, managing the stacks is very important. You do run out of the cleansed ground very quickly. If your stacks get above 30, 35, or 40, it will result in very, very high damage. You don't want to have that happen. I'm going to talk about a few tricks to managing your stacks towards the end of the guide. Now, the next ad is the Drake. If you do not cleanse this, it will spawn a Drake that the off-tank needs to pick up immediately and face away from the raid. The Drake does a AoE breath attack that targets a random player. It can target anybody, anywhere on the map, the other tank, healers, ranged, anybody. So you've got to keep an eye out for who it's targeting and move out of the way because it does very high AoE damage. The other thing the Drake will really do is he will enrage at 30% health and start doing pulsing AoE raid damage. So I'd recommend your healers save their raid cooldowns for times like that. There is a point in the fight, I believe it's wave 5, where you will get 2 Drakes at the same time. So if you choose not to cleanse one of the Drakes on that wave, you will have to deal with both of them. And if your raid cleaves them down, they will both enrage at the same time. So I'd recommend killing them one at a time on that wave. Otherwise, the Drakes are not a big priority to kill. They can be easily managed and should be taken down after the other ads that are down. The third ad is the Keeper of the Grove, which you see on the screen right there, the tree. If you do not cleanse this ad, it's going to spawn a hostile NPC, and the only thing it really does is an AoE stomp that everybody has to stack for. It does split damage to everybody in range. If nobody stacks for it, it's guaranteed to one-shot the tank on him at that time. If you choose to cleanse him, periodically he will channel an AoE mana restoring buff to everybody within 20 yards of him. It is a very powerful buff to have because it gives your healers a lot of mana back. I haven't been in a raid where we've managed to go the entire fight without having to cleanse at least one of these guys, because the healers simply cannot manage the incoming damage without going out of mana. And finally, the last ad to talk about is the Dryad Sisters. This is a pair of ads that will spawn if they are not interrupted they will channel a heal on the boss and heal him for about 30 million HP. If they get even one heal off, it's almost guaranteed to wipe your raid. It will screw up your timing with the ad phases. It'll also make it so you most likely won't have the mana to burst him down by the time you do get to phase 2. Your healers will probably have already run out of mana just waiting for your DPS to make up that 30 million damage. Now, they are the lowest priority ads to kill. You pretty much want to just try and cleave them down with other ads. The only thing is you have to make sure you keep them interrupted. So whenever they spawn, all of your melee and range DPS should set them as a focus target, or whatever they can do to keep track of them, and then your off tank should call out for interrupts on them when they start channeling their heal. It is imperative that you get that heal interrupted. Not interrupting it, again, it almost guarantees a wipe on heroic and higher difficulties. And so that covers the ads that he's going to spawn. Now, the order that I found most effective to do this boss fight in was to cleanse the following ads, and that is Wisp, Wisp, Tree, Wisp, Tree. So, if you do not push Cenarius into phase 2, you will have to deal with 6 waves of ads. Your goal is to try and push him to phase 2 on the 5th wave. Now, how you do that is, as the ads on the 5th wave are dying, meaning the last, I believe it's Drake, is dying on the 5th wave, you lust and burn. You have to push him below 30% health to trigger phase 2. If you do not trigger phase 2 before the 6th wave, you will have to deal with another wave of ads. If you screw up the timing on that, it's almost guaranteed to be a wipe for your raid because you will not be able to manage the ads and his phase 2 at the same time. He's also going to do a couple of other things in phase 1, which is periodically you're going to get the stacks of Creeping Nightmare on you. It's simply a dot that does damage over time in stacks. The damage increases by the number of stacks you have. You remove these stacks by jumping in the pools of cleansed ground, which is the green stuff you see on the screen. Those pools are spawned by Malfurion at the beginning of each ad phase, or those spawned by the Wisp ads if you cleanse them. You want to make sure you manage those pools really well. You don't want to run out of them. I recommend not clearing your stacks till you have 25 stacks or more. He's also going to spawn something called Nightmare Brambles, which are the roots that you will see spawn. It's a big purple circle that they spawn in, and then they start chasing random players. Now, a lot of raid leaders made the mistake of blaming people for running these roots through the raid groups and getting people caught by them. Trust me, there is no way to predict the path of the roots. They target random players, they switch targets all the time. Everybody has to pay attention and watch out for them on their own. Nobody can call out, hey, they're going this way, because they could very easily turn at the last second. So don't be that raid leader that wants to yell at everybody for the roots, because you cannot control their path. On Heroic, the roots are very deadly. If anybody gets rooted by them, it's dispellable, so healers need to be on top of your dispels with it, because it does very, very high damage if you get rooted. Otherwise, they are largely just a nuisance that you can ignore. Classes that can use movement-free abilities, I believe like Hand of Freedom for Paladins, can clear up huge patches of this stuff on the ground. So every once in a while, they should pop one of their cooldowns, just run through a bunch of the roots to clear the area. And then, assuming you've done everything in phase 1 correctly, you will start phase 2 when Cenarius reaches 30% health. Once he enters this phase, the whole battle changes. Both tanks need to jump on Cenarius, and you will start doing tank swaps. He's going to periodically use an ability called Spear of Nightmares. This is a one-shot ability if no damage mitigation is popped for it. Every time the tank is hit by Spear of Nightmares, it increases the damage from the next Spear of Nightmares by a stacking percentage. It also will create a huge pool of AoE on the ground that spreads based on the amount of damage the tank took. It's important to note that the damage from this attack is all physical, so only physical damage reduction abilities should be used. Anything that reduces magic damage will not reduce the amount of damage from the spear, thus resulting in a larger pool of AoE on the ground. It is also important to note that absorbs and shields that do absorb effects do not count for damage mitigation, because you are still taking the damage from it. It's just being dealt to your shield instead of your actual character's health bar, so it will still increase the size of the AoE pools on the ground. The other mechanic for phase 2 is Malfurion will occasionally become rooted. When this happens, all of your ranged DPS needs to switch to him immediately and free him from it. The roots that lock him down are targetable. It's an NPC essentially, so you can burst it down with DPS. If you do not do that, he will stop spawning the patches of cleansed ground, and you will not be able to cleanse your stacks anymore. Pretty much what we found is that we at least need him to spawn one additional patch of cleansed ground during phase 2 to keep our stacks low enough to where it doesn't wipe the raid. After that, you can continue to focus on the boss and ignore Malfurion if he gets rooted again. The tanks should treat the fight like Ursoc at this point. They should kite him to the edge of the pools of AoE that spawn and tank him just barely on the edge of it so that you do not pull him too far and use up more space on the arena. You should also be kiting him around the very far edge of the arena. If you do this correctly and you use your cooldowns perfectly, roughly by the time he dies, you will have just reached the last open space left in the arena. If not, if you have messed your cooldowns up or you don't have the DPS to burst him down by then, you will most likely have to pull him to the center of the arena, which should still be clear of the AoE patch on the ground, and you will have to burn him here. If you do not, the pools will engulf the entire arena and you will not be able to heal through it. So in summary, make sure you cleanse the right ads at the right time. Make sure you do not lust until it is appropriate. Don't lust too soon, don't lust too late. You have to push him into phase 2 in between a wave. If you do not, you will have to deal with the ads and his phase 2 at the same time, guaranteeing yourself a wipe. And look out for the thorns on the ground. That is pretty much the entire fight. It is a lot simpler once you know it and you know the mechanics. I know it looks intimidating at first glance, trust me it was, but once you figure it out, it really is not a challenge at all.